So we were on the set of the pilot, and we were talking about what we could, just as it happens when you're on the set of the pilot, you start seeing the sets and you start seeing the actors and you start thinking about, well, what we could do next and all the different possibilities that there could be. And we were all of us just so in love with David and so happy to have him on the show, and just loved everything he was doing with Hank. And Jeff Johns and Greg Berlanti and I were standing there, and we were saying it's like just collectively amongst us, it's so funny we cast David, because he's got those weird ears, he's got a little bit of alien ears, and they said, it's funny. I mean, I don't remember which one of us said it, but it was like, oh, if we were ever going to make a Martian Manhunter show or something, David would have been the perfect Martian Manhunter, and it was Jeff who said, well, why can't he be? And we looked at each other and we were like, well, wait a minute. And then we started thinking about everything that was happening in the pilot, and the sort of notion that, because we already had the Hank Henshaw idea, sort of set up, that we would be playing this sort of bad secret that he was holding. And then we started thinking about it. It's like, oh, well, wait a minute. What if it's a good secret? What if it's like the reverse of the Flash? What's the reverse of the Reverse Flash? That you think he's bad, but he turns out to not only be good, but literally the most good person in the DC universe. And then we started thinking about, well, what all of Hank's, because originally Hank was going to have a different backstory, like everything he said in the pilot, and we said, oh, actually, if he survived Mars and came here, and his whole goal was to protect Earth and not let Earth suffer the same fate as Mars, well, then he's doing exactly what Kara says and what Astra says, which is not here, never again. And he's got it, he's had to lead this crazy existence pretending to be Hank Henshaw, and he doesn't want Supergirl around. She could mess everything up, and we're like, oh, it actually all fits. And then we started talking about what the feasibility of it was. First we had to tell David, oh, by the way. And, he was so funny, because Allie and I took him out to lunch, and he was like, I'm not going to be Shrek, am I? And that was his biggest fear, and we said, no. And we went to Armin, and Armin, when you see him, you're going to die. I mean, it is so spectacular. I mean, it's just amazing. And then the more we thought about it, everything just sort of flowed from that. And we've got Martian episodes and Gem, and it's sort of the secret of Supergirl, that within the body of the series of Supergirl, there is a Martian Manhunter series, rolling throughout it. And I don't know. It's the thing that makes us giggle the most, and watching people online, and actually seeing a lot of people now really start to suspect that that's who he is, but in a good way, because everyone who says I think it's who it is, it's always with glee, or I hope, or oh my God, is this really true? It's not like, Jesus, he better not be the Martian Manhunter, or I'm done. And that's sort of the toughest part has been convincing David that it's Jean Jones, not John Jones. He's had a re-ADR a couple of times, but it's been really fun, and it actually so fit in with how Supergirl has been evolving, and how she's somebody who's embraced her powers and stepped out into the light, and in a way Jean is closeted. And he's afraid, and then he says in an upcoming episode, which I actually just watched last night, when Alex is actually encouraging him to use his powers, he says, she says, what's the difference between you and Kara? And he said, your sister looks like a cheerleader, and I look like a monster. And I really, Jean has always been one of my favorite characters from my childhood, and then through the Justice League cartoon, and just that soulfulness and that sadness, and the one who is the most frightening looking of all the Justice Leaguers, and yet is the one with the purest heart. And then watching this relationship that's growing between him and Alex, and him and Kara, and that started out in a very gruff place, and then by the time you're getting into the meat of this season, they've become this little family unit, and he's become a surrogate father for them, but at the same time they're helping him become more human, and it's sort of one of the great surprises of the show, that for the people who are watching, that there's this great you know, it's like that old gum where you bit into it and all the juice came out. People are still unwrapping it, and they're gonna get the juice. We always plan for success, so there's stuff that's been laid, you know, even in the ones the ones that have already aired that are being set up. You know, we've always known sort of what the what the plan, the sort of big bad plan was, and you know how it's being set up and how it ties back to Allura and Astra and Nan, who you guys will get to meet soon. So with the Flash, we were given carte blanche to do everything that was related to the Flash. There's nothing that's tied to the Flash universe that we can't touch. There's nothing tied to the Hawkman universe that we can't touch. There was nothing tied to the Firestorm universe that we couldn't touch. So, you know, again, I think there's this I feel like there's always this sort of like people kind of want to know if there's a conflict between us and the features, or you know, is there a problem with DC and you know and us, or you know, or are we jealous of other shows, or are we jealous of what else we get to do? And the truth, like first again, as always, Jeff is my friend. You know, we've been friends for a really long time, long before all of this other stuff started, and we're all doing it together. And you know that's the other thing. You know, like to me, Supergirl is as DC a DC thing as much as the Flash is. I mean, you know, with Supergirl, I mean, we have episodes coming up where like you've got Supergirl and the Martian Manhunter and Nan, and you know we got to do Livewire and Reactron, and you know we've got some other big villains coming up, and some cool announcements we'll be making soon. And so it's we're kind of getting to do whatever we want anywhere. I mean, it's pretty rare that, you know, it's funny. It's more than sort of like getting to have a character on the show. We always get dinged on like a name check kind of thing. You know, it's more about leaving the little things that are like so easy to cut that where they're just like, oh, don't say that this person knows that person, you know, because that can get confusing. But again, I mean, you know, it's almost like, I mean, for us, we feel like we're the beneficiaries, and I mean, you know, the features have, you know, sort of the 5 big ones, and we basically get to do everything else. So it's not like we're sitting around grinding our teeth, like, you know, I can't believe we don't get to like have Batman on our show. I mean, we literally get everyone else in the DC universe.
Looking ahead to Monday's episode, we know that Kara is, you know, she's bleeding in the end of this week's episode, and we know that the next one's called Human for a Day. So what can you tease about, you know, where have her powers gone and how she's going to be handling that?
Well, it's something that actually it's sort of new from the comics. It was a Jeff Johns idea, which was that he could, you know, that Superman or any Kryptonian cells are basically suffused with solar radiation, and that's where they get their powers from. And the heat vision is a expulsion of that energy. That's where it comes from, so that, you know, you could actually just basically run out and you would need to recharge. So you know, we really it was one of the, you know, I was such a fan of that comic and that run, and you know, talked to Jeff and said, you know, could we do something with that? And he was like, absolutely. And so you know, these were all set up in a certain way where she would, you know, she's in this place where she's kind of like, you know, struggling with her role, and you know, am I doing this well, and how should I be doing things, and how should I go about things, and then take it away from her, and let her really appreciate what it means. And we also just love the idea of you know, like Oliver and like Barry, that Kara's a hero whether she has her powers or not. And there's this great moment in that comic book where Superman confronts a guy with a gun and basically talks him out of it, even though he knows if the guy pulls the trigger, he'll get killed. And that sort of became the centerpiece of that episode. And you kind of saw it a little bit in the trailer. But she basically emptied her powers, killing the Red Tornado, and you know, she needs a couple of days, and unfortunately, it was the day of the giant earthquake.
It sounds like she should talk to Jay right now, Jay Garrick. But speaking of some of those other characters, could you bring anyone over from your CW shows, like that were not the main characters, but maybe some of the little ones that have popped up here or there, or in Earth 2 or anything like that?
I mean, there's always those late nights, delirious, you know, semi high on pizza, where you're like, you know, it'd be really cool if, but you know, right now there's no legitimate actual plan to like bring Cisco onto Supergirl or bring Wynn onto Legends. I mean, it's just, you know, first of all, we don't even know if we could, like, legally. I mean, it's, you know, and quite frankly, like, you know, just making Legends, just making the Arrowverse, which is what we call Legends, Flash and Arrow, like work, you know, and then making Supergirl work, like it's enough of a challenge without like having to add a fourth player.
Can I last question?
I feel like since this show...
Really?
Cassie's heading over to...
Oh, wow, sorry.
I feel like since this show has been announced, since we saw the first look, since the premiere, it has been under an especially harsh microscope. And as
yes.
Yes, and you know, I feel like, and so I actually want to ask, you know, do you guys feel that? How do you feel about that? And has it made its way into the show? Because maybe I'm projecting, but I feel like there are little bits in the show that feel maybe a little self-referential, like about just the struggle in general.
We definitely we're definitely aware of it. We definitely feel it. I mean, I think that you know, it's you know, without necessarily realizing it, especially more for me, I think, than Greg and Allie. Like, Allie hasn't been a showrunner the way I have, but then also all of the shows that I've created have been on the CW, and you know, being on the CBS stage, which is a much larger stage, you know, more people know about it. You know, it's more, you know, ubiquitous. And I think obviously also the pressure of having a female superhero. You know, we just don't have that. You know, that level of scrutiny, and you know, with the other projects, you know, fortunately, at least for us, you know, we do have the level of scrutiny from people who really truly care about these characters and how they've been portrayed. So I am used to a certain amount of, you're doing it wrong. But I think that the early episodes, especially, I think. You know, I'm proud of all of the episodes. I think they're great, and this one, 6, I just was like one of my favorite hours of TV I've been involved with. But I do think that there's a lot of, you know, everybody has their view of what this should be and what it should mean, and what it should mean to women and what it should mean to men, and what are we saying, and you know, how every decision that Kara makes, is she speaking for every woman, or is she just speaking for herself? And you know, if we, you know, we've had a lot of discussions about, well, Kara made a mistake in an episode, and it's like, well, it's the same mistake that Barry makes in the episode, and nobody calls us and says, you're saying Barry Allen's a weak man. You know, so we are definitively aware of all of that stuff. I actually think that what's happened is, now that those sort of first episodes are out there and we've been done with them, we've been able to, just even for ourselves, just kind of relax and just be like, look, it is what it is, and people are going to say what they're going to say, and we just need to make the best show we can. So I think in some ways, we like, now that the show is out there and people have commented both positively and negatively, you know, we've been able to just go, well, what's making us happy? Which again is always what's our guiding star. And I think, you know, this next batch of episodes that we're making now are just much more like, what's the best show we can tell, and not try to feel like, well, we have to speak for everybody and please everybody, and you know, so it's